Thank you, VP Felix. And now to give the welcoming remarks, we'd like to call on Apcu Chairman, Cagayan Export Zone Authority Administrator, Secretary Raul Lambino.
Again, good afternoon to everyone. President Jeff and officers and members of the Association for Philippines-China Understanding. To our distinguished speaker this afternoon, who will be properly introduced later. To all the other participants who take time out to attend this regular forum of Apcu. I'm very glad and very happy that our speaker today has agreed to give us updates and brief us of investments coming from the People's Republic of China. We have worked together the last 5 years, and I'm very, very certain that he's going to give us the real picture of foreign direct investments in the Philippines, more particularly from that of the People's Republic of China. I myself am one of those who keep on promoting the Philippines as a good foreign investment destination in this part of Asia. I have traveled so many times in China the last 10 years, even when I was still in the private sector. I keep reminding our Chinese friends whenever we are going to talk about Chinese investments or Chinese activities here in the Philippines, that for so many years, there are more Filipino investments in China than Chinese investments here in the Philippines. I keep on telling them that they should distinguish financing from investments, because in financing, that is not actually an investment to consider of. It's still considered to be, well, capital inflow into the Philippines, but we are going to pay those either in because it's a grant or it's an aid or however you are going to call it. It is important that there has to be a big difference of the investments, real investments, just as like the investment made by China on the National Grid Corporation, the state grid, that's an investment. But there are certain Chinese money that flowed in the country, which cannot consider as investment, but more of financing. I'm very glad that we are going to have someone who has really a first-hand knowledge of the real investments that have flown into the country, more particularly from the People's Republic of China. I cannot wait but hear from him again. We have been together in many fora here in the Philippines and abroad. And I know for sure that our participants in today's forum will have a better understanding of what China has been doing in this country of ours. So welcome to this forum. And again, good afternoon to everyone.
Thank you, Chairman Raul. And now to introduce the guest speaker this afternoon, we would like to call on Mr. Sixto Benedicto, Apcu Vice Chairman.
Thank you, President Jeff, and welcome again, Chairman Raul, Secretary Raul Lambino. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce our speaker for today, Undersecretary Seferino S. Rodolfo, or USEC Perry for short. Obtained his economics degree from the School of Economics of the University of the Philippines and his Master of Science in Industrial Economics on full scholarship from the Hans Seidel Foundation of Germany, from the Center for Research and Communication, also now known as UAP. He likewise holds a DPA from the National College of Public Administration and Governance of the University of the Philippines. As the Undersecretary for Industry, Development and Trade Policy Group, USEC Perry has been leading the crafting and implementation of the Philippine industrial policy and international trade negotiation agenda, as well as the Philippine government's bilateral trade and investment engagements with key partner economies. Notably, among USEC Perry's accomplishments are the successful negotiation of the Philippine-European Free Trade Association Free Trade Agreement, the only signed bilateral FTA of the country other than that with Japan and the Philippines, application to the EU GSP Plus program. Concurrently, managing head of the Board of Investment, Yusek Perry also sits in the Philippine Economic Zone Authority board and chairs the committee that coordinates the 18 investment promotion agencies across the country. In his 5 years as the BOI managing head, he has set the highest investment registration in the agency's 53-year history, amounting to 1.14 trillion peso. Without much ado, may I present to you Dr. Seferino S. Rodolfo, Undersecretary of the Department of Trade and Industry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sixto Benedicto, and thank you also to Secretary Raul Lambino and Mr. Jeffrey Nang for inviting me, and good afternoon to all the officers and members of the Association of Philippines-China Understanding. It's really a relief when I was texting Secretary Raul Lambino earlier. I asked him, will there be media personalities or will this be covered by media? And then he said, no, so you can speak freely. So I was really itching to get this opportunity to speak with you. Also for me to learn and get your advice. As Secretary Lambino said, ito, no holds barred, really. On the ground, what is happening. Not all good news, but there are certainly good news that has been happening. I also understand, because my office, my team prepared a investment promo speech. So I don't think this is an investment promo forum. Am I right, Sec Raul? Tama po ba? It's really a frank discussion between us.
Yes, you're right, Perry. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. But nevertheless, let me go through some of the formalities of what was prepared, and then I'll be very frank towards the end. Although the formalities, I assure you, are all true. When we speak in government, we don't talk about falsehood. Lahat totoo, everything is true, all data, empirics backed up. But the perspective, I'll try to give you a very, very frank perspective later on. So first of all, our sincerest gratitude and congratulations to the APCU for successfully organizing this 12th APCU Forum, an excellent platform for continued strong economic cooperation and business collaboration between the Philippines and China. As the Philippines builds back better from the pandemic, we would like to thank the government of China for helping the country in the battle against COVID-19 with China's latest donation of 1 million doses of Sinovac vaccine last June 28. That arrived last June 28. As always, China remains a true friend of the Philippines. Actually, Secmon, I think it was late 2020 when he wrote his counterpart in China and in Russia for us to be given some preference when it comes to supplying the vaccines, and we're very happy that China really responded well. We are also pleased to note that the Philippines was chosen as the guest country of honor in the 2020 China International Fair for Investments and Trade, or what we call as the CFIT. So actually, this is the commemorative plaque of the CFIT. It's actually very important for us to be the guest country of honor of CFIT because it's a state-organized, it's a China government organized fair. And we see that as an opportunity to really present the Philippines as an investment destination, somehow bordering on, for some, they would like to call it as attracting those who are relocating from China to other countries, so in this particular case to the Philippines. But for us, we'd like to present it as Philippines as a complementary location for those who are in China. That's why it's very important for us to do this in a platform that is organized by the Chinese government itself. So originally we were just supposed to be a country of honor. The designation for the Philippines was supposed to be just for 2020. But because of the pandemic, and we have discussed this with China government, this has been extended to 2021. So for 2 years. So the main event for the CFIT will be happening on September 8 to 11 in Xiamen, Fujian province. And we'd like to invite our Chinese friends to visit the Philippines pavilion at the CFIT. Now, in terms of Philippines-China trade and investment relations, China is, of course, our top trading partner. So in various speeches, in various releases, you would see that China sometimes is being labeled as our third biggest trading partner. But that is if you segregate China and Hong Kong. But if you take them together, they would account already from between 1/4 to 1/3 of our total trade. So they're really big in terms both for exports and for our imports. So although the absolute values would be in favor of China, but you look at it in a relative sense compared with our total import and compared with our total export. So balance ho in that sense. China is also among our biggest sources of approved foreign investments, as total Chinese approved investments registered with the investment promo agencies amounted to $3.3 billion for 2016 all the way to the first quarter of 2021, or an average annual growth rate of 59%. Kasi yung base naman niya, if you compare it to before 2016, is quite low. As was mentioned by Sec Raul, there are really more Filipino investors in China, Filipino companies investing in China than the reverse prior to 2016. Now, let me cite a number of Chinese companies that have invested in the Philippines. This would include, for example, Welgao Electronic Technology, that is into printed circuit board manufacturing and assembly. We also have Florida Blanca Steel Industries, that is engaged in steel pipes. APF Group Holding Corporation, with investments also in manufacturing. Wuhan Fiber Home International Technologies Philippines. Yes, that's the same Wuhan that is allegedly where the pandemic started. They're into information technology and telecommunications, and that's established a subsidiary in the Philippines. By the way, really, when our commercial attaché in Beijing and Shanghai were showing me pictures of their visit to Wuhan Fiber Home International Technologies, it's really like normal na talaga. And I'm sure you all know that. Liangan Power Corporation. We also have iHydrocore Corporation with investments in renewable energy. And of course, we all know the investments of China Telecoms Corporation to form Dito Telecommunity Corporation. And then we also have Panhua Integrated Steel that has invested in Mindanao, Shenzhen Grandsun Electronics Company, and then JB Packaging Corporation. We also have Badan Building Materials Corporation, Reliant Hydro, and then Trinks Bicycles. I'll discuss in a while some of these. So the opportunities that we're presenting for investments from Chinese companies to the Philippines are in the area of iron and steel manufacturing, e-vehicle, motorcycle assembly and manufacturing, oil refinery, agribusiness, iron ore processing, and other high-value manufacturing and R&D activities, among others. Now, I'll start to skip some of the items that the staff, my team has prepared. And then just, I'll go straight to this one. Okay, maybe just some last words. So many are asking, have we been able to attract Chinese investments? If you're talking about the Chinese companies, including state-owned enterprises that have been going to the Philippines, you would remember that in the early part of Mayor Duterte's administration, there had really been many, parang ano yan eh, maybe almost every week there would be quite a sizable delegation coming from particularly state-owned enterprises, yung uh, have been coming here. If you're talking about state-owned enterprises, maybe if you'd consider China Telecoms as a state-owned enterprise, then yes, may mga natuloy. But some of the big ticket items that we were expecting did not materialize. However, what we are seeing now really are investments that are really more from private. I'm not even sure, maybe you should also educate me, but these are not state-owned enterprises anymore, more of state enterprises who are coming here. And let me talk a bit about some of them. So I mentioned earlier that there was a company that invested here in electric bicycle. They have really been importing electric bicycles, particularly because of the pandemic. There's been a surge in demand in bicycles, but the local partner was able to convince their Chinese supplier to put up an electric bicycle manufacturing here in the Philippines, not just for the Philippine market, but mainly for the EU market, because we enjoy GSP plus privilege when it comes to the EU market. I just forgot what is the MFN or regular tariff rate of bicycles going to the EU, but I think it should be somewhere about 14%. But they will be producing here the foldable electric bicycle type. And if you look at the EU market, the biggest exports coming from the Philippines in terms of manufactured goods would be bicycles and also the vacuum cleaners that are being produced by Dyson. So so there we have an investment coming from a Chinese company. Mainly, I would think that it's really because of our preferential access to a big market, such as the EU. We also have, I mentioned the company name earlier, but I won't mention it again. There is a Chinese company that has invested in steel in Mindanao. It's not a state-owned enterprise, but I think one of the motivation why they are investing in the Philippines is that they are trying to find a market where there could be fairer competition within the market, because I think that they are encountering some unfair competition if they are competing with big state-owned enterprises in their home market, be it because of the size or whatever other advantages that a state-owned enterprise might have in their particular market. So they have become big enough for them to invest abroad, and they have seen the Philippines as a location for their investments. And they are also looking at the Philippines not just for the domestic market, but also as a hub whereby they could also export to ASEAN. Now, I also mentioned one of the companies that I mentioned also earlier in the list that we have it's very interesting because not only will they be offering services to the Philippines, particular in the area of telecoms. This is not Chinatel. This is not Dito, but another company that I mentioned earlier. But what's interesting about their intention is that they would like to use the Philippines as their talent training center. Maybe taking advantage of the talent pool that we have here and also our English language proficiency. And from the Philippines, use this as a base for their projects when they are implementing projects within our region, particularly those regions where that are not native Chinese speakers. So siguro if you're talking about countries like Indonesia, Thailand, where their English could if you would have an advantage if you're English speaker versus, for instance, a Chinese speaker. So very interesting because of that, and also because they would like to make the Philippines as a regional technology R&D center. Now, another, it's not, it's another lead that we are pursuing, and this has been reported before in media, is a group of manufacturers coming from Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Toy Makers Association. Hence, I have the action figures from Star Wars because these are the products that they are manufacturing in southern China. Now, the reason why they are looking at the Philippines, this was pre-pandemic pa, they were looking at the Philippines because they were slapped a higher tariff for their exports from China to the US. And I think the US accounts for 70 to 80% of their total export market. Now, in addition to that, they've also shared that one of the problems that they're facing in China is with respect to labor turnover. And when they were here, they were asking also about, they were very particular when it comes to labor. They were asking, are workers here allowed to form unions? So those were the kind, they're very particular about those things. But of course, for us in Philippines, we don't derogate labor rights just to be able to access markets. In fact, that is one of the main attraction for one of the major reasons why we continue to be given GSP privileges in the EU and in the US and in most other markets, because they know that in the Philippines, we treat our workers fairly, and we won't unfairly compete with companies that are located in their areas, because we also pay decent wage, we treat our laborers decently. Now, in terms of policy-wise, so that's the situation when it comes to trade. I think we gained a lot when it comes to trade. In terms of export in particular, they now account for 1/3 to 1/4 of our total export market, compared with perhaps before 2016, the share of China and Hong Kong would probably be 18% taken together. But we were hoping to be able to cement these inroads that we made in terms of exports, because from us, our experience is we really wanted to be able to pursue a bilateral FTA with China over and above our engagement with China through the ASEAN-China FTA and the upcoming RCEP. We wanted an FTA, bilateral FTA between Philippines and China, to be able to cement all of this, because we were saying this is the best way really to make sure that succeeding administrations that we are able to really insulate the economic relationship from all of the political noises that may be happening in the future. And also, in terms of trade and investments, we were able to hold one meeting of the Joint Commission on Trade and Economic Cooperation between the Philippines and China. This is what we call as the JCTEC. A JEC is normally the bilateral engagement that a country would have with a partner for closer economic relations, from trade to investments, discussing market access issues, etc. We were hoping to have had a more regular JCTEC. Prior to this JCTEC, I think the last JCTEC was before 2010. We were able to hold one at the start of Mayor Duterte's administration, and we hosted that. We were hoping that China would schedule the next JCTEC. We had been following it up. Maybe they were quite busy, but we received a response, I think, last December, that they are, as a reply to a letter by Secretary Mon Lopez, that they welcome the convening again of the JCTEC. For us, very important that we be able to have a JCTEC before 2022. I think that's it from my side. Just to summarize, we had big gains in terms of trade, in particular in terms of exports. In terms of investment, some of the big ticket did not materialize, but we're very excited that really commercially meaningful investments in high technology areas had been coming in. There's also maybe just one last point, because Secretary Raul also mentioned in his opening remarks about more Filipino investors coming to China before 2016 than the reverse. Now, we are also seeing that there are, from among these investors, there are those who are bringing back or expanding from their China operations to Philippines. For example, there is one particular project that we're very excited about. It's on electric vehicle. The difference is this company is willing to really put in investments in the infrastructure. As you may well know, that's a major constraint to whoever would like to be a market leader in electric vehicle in the Philippines. We basically don't have the charging stations yet, but this company is willing to invest in the charging stations. I know that it will be a big risk because there's no market yet, but this company, a major stockholder of a Filipino, is a major stockholder of a Chinese company that produces electric vehicles, is, for the first phase of the project, willing to invest in infrastructure, initially importing the electric vehicles, but at a certain number of units of sales, maybe 20,000, they would be already putting in assembly of electric, maybe one line for assembly of a particular model of the electric vehicle. They produce both passenger cars and commercial vehicles, including buses in China. So let me stop there. And again, thank you very much for this opportunity. Not all good news, but definitely there are good news which were shared. Hope we could have done better, and we are open to your suggestions, being those on the ground. Salamat po. Thank you, Sec Raul, again, and Jeffrey.
Yeah. Thank you, Sec Rodolfo. We have some questions from the audience, from Aaron Jed Rabena. Sir, you mentioned some big ticket investments that did not materialize. May we know why this is so?
No. Yung siguro one big ticket that we were really expecting, and we really worked hard on this It was on a integrated steel mill coming from there's a local partner here and a Chinese state-owned enterprise. Maybe this Chinese state-owned enterprise, there were at least two candidate Chinese state-owned enterprise. Various reasons, from location, from the Taal volcanic eruption in from the area that they were looking at in quite close pala to Taal, such that when the volcanic eruption happened in 2020 early part, so that was affected. To one other area was quite near quite near Marawi, meaning not really near Marawi from our perspective. So we know the area, we know the terrain, but for them it became a problem. This is from the side of the partners. They were saying that one issue also was entry of induction type furnaces into the Philippines. As you may well know, induction furnaces were banned in China, and some of these were able to get into the Philippines. Talaga wala namang media dito sa Kraon, di ba? And I'll deny everything. Some of these were well, the technology where somehow got into the Philippines, and they know that these Chinese state-owned enterprises, sabi nila, at least nung partner sinasabi, they see that might affect the profitability, because it will be providing unfair competition if you have this type of technology here. And for them, there's also the issue of the compliance with standards of this type of technology. So yun. So that's an example, sir, of big ticket item that we were looking at. I'm not too sure if post-pandemic we could revisit again the interest of this company.
Okay. Another question from Aaron Ravena. Based on the latest data, what is the amount of Chinese investment since President Duterte took office?
Dun sa what I mentioned earlier, from 2016 to 20... Teka lang, 100... Since the start of the Duterte administration, total Chinese approved investment by IPAs amounted to 165 billion pesos, with an average, if you look at it, historical perspective, average annual growth rate of about 59%. Yun ho yung lumalabas.
How does this compare with the previous administrations?
Yun nga, sir, mas mataas, sir. Spectacular growth, sir.
Okay.
If you look at it, compared it with the previous administration.
Okay, sir. Good. From Professor Tina Clemente, you mentioned that the Philippines is trying to attract investors that are relocating from China. How would you assess Philippines' competitiveness relative to our regional peers, for example, Vietnam or Indonesia?
No, sir. If you look at the numbers, talagang, Vietnam muna, sir. Vietnam is really raking it in. But that's because they are really, if you look at spillover investments coming from China, Vietnam being able to having a shared border with China, they're really top choice. So logistics wise, very easy. And for us, I think because of the 2 or 3 years that it took us to discuss and eventually pass the CREATE law, the incentives regime, the new incentives regime, I think that was really a dampener when it comes to being able to attract export-oriented manufacturing investments that are relocating or looking for a complementary location from China to elsewhere where they could use this as a base to now export, in particular, to the US. So, but right now we already have the CREATE law. I'm hoping that we could attract more, and we are seeing that we are able to attract more. Although, parang every step of the way there are new issues that you have to address. Parang firefighting mode tayo palagi. Right now, think if there are if there are exporters here among your group, I'm sure you know about the revenue regulation 2021 about the treatment of VAT. But I hope that we could already, yung si Sec Raul, I'm sure yung mga locators niya, yung mga exporters, they have been up in arms. But some good news, we may be able to have a clarification from DOF and BIR on that revenue regulation soon, baka Monday. So yun, sir.
Okay.
In short, sir, moving forward, we're hoping that with the CREATE bill, we are more competitive now in terms of incentives, and we can further highlight now advantage when it comes to labor turnover. Sorry, sir. If you also look at investments in China that are relocating or trying to find a complementary location, we are also looking at for other economies. So Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. Because if you look at between 1979 up to 2018-2019, the stock of investments in manufacturing in China mainly came from all of these economies. So if you aside from the Chinese companies, which we will be targeting through the CFIT, we also have to not forget these East Asian economies, because they were the source. They were the ones who went to China to fuel their export-oriented manufacturing development in the first place. Yun, sir.
Okay. You had mentioned the CREATE law, no? From the point of view of foreign investors, do you think the incentives now, having been rationalized, they are now time-bound, is it more attractive to them now, no, with the CREATE law rather than before the previous years?
First of all, sir, at least now there is certainty. Meaning for 2 or 3 years, the investment community has no certainty as to what would be the incentives that we'll be offering. So that's one. And second, yes, we no longer have the perpetual 5% tax on gross income earned. But in place of that, you have a long enough period of 10 years. So I think if you look at the investment cycle, normally an export product would have a product life cycle, maybe at most 8 years. So the CREATE law does not prevent you anyway from registering another project, even in parallel to what you in sequence. So but as long as these are different projects, and also under the CREATE law, we are able to provide incentives for what we call as enhanced deduction. So I'm sure you're well aware, but just to emphasize, when we talk about enhanced deductions, after your income tax holiday period, anywhere between 4 to 7 years, depending on how far you are from NCR or the level of technology that you're incorporating into your project, you can then have a 10 years of enhanced deduction, or you can opt for the 5% tax on gross income earned. So pili ho kayo if you're export-oriented. dun sa enhanced deduction, and we're hoping that many would choose this path because this is really where we could develop our local supply chain. So halimbawa ko dito, ito yung 50% additional tax deduction, 50% additional deduction for local purchases. So halimbawa, you are an exporter and instead of importing a component, you are going to source it from someone else within the Philippines. That 1 peso that you, for every 1 peso that you source locally, you will be allowed to deduct 50% additional from your pagka local sourcing. So hopefully that would provide more incentive for you to source local than to import, which is what is happening typically in an export zone. Parang import all of the components, yung labor lang natin doon, tapos labas kagad. Ito, we are really trying to promote local sourcing. And then 50% additional deduction for labor, 50% additional deduction for power, pagkatapos 100% additional deduction for training, 100% additional deduction for R&D. So yun ho yung mga ibang incentive. And for Subic and for Clark, before they did not have the income tax holiday. Diretso sila kaagad to the 5% tax on gross income earned. Ngayon, everyone, lahat meron ng income tax holiday of between 4 to 7 years, including si Subic and Clark, sir.
Okay. Ever since the US imposed 25% tariffs on Chinese exports to the US, now the Chinese investors coming to the Philippines, how many percent do you think are coming here to invest, to sell to the Philippine market and to sell to the US market?
Mostly,
Because of-
sir,
yeah.
sorry, sir. Mostly, sir, pagka kasi export manufacturing, lalo na yung mga nakukuha natin, mostly, sir, talaga sila for export rather than for the domestic market. In particular, before the create, because there is a ceiling of 30% maximum that you can sell locally. But with the create, actually, wala na yung distinction na yun. Actually, with the create, what is also good about the create is that we are now allowing investments by foreign companies who are going to access the domestic market. That day we allow that, except that you cannot have incentives. But right now we can already provide incentives to those types of projects.
Okay, from Hubert Chua, much media has been critical about how little of Chinese investment commitments has materialized. Is this true or unfair? Does it mostly pertain to state-owned enterprises?
Exactly. Yung sa state-owned, meron ka, I think, if you consider, I think si China Telecoms, yung investment siya sa dito, so yun yung nag-materialize natin. Some of the big ticket did not materialize. But if you talk about Chinese investments in general, and I think they were really encouraged by the closer relationship that we have with China during this administration, then meron hong mga pumasok talaga. And ito yung magko-continue on kahit na sino yung nakaupo. Kasi these are really the commercial yung motivation for all of this. And I think, if I may also, Jeffrey,
Sure.
yung China state-owned enterprises, parang ang tagal talagang mag-decide. Parang every step of the way, parang ang tagal. Samantalang yung mga commercial, ang bilis eh. Parang isang due diligence lang, tignan nila. Tapos, okay, pasok. Ganun.
Yeah. Well, from Bea Indonto, similar question. How would you say the incoming election would affect the plans, for economic recovery and the plans of foreign investors, especially Chinese, in coming to invest in the Philippines?
Ang nakikita, sir, natin, rather than the election, it's the recovery effort that will be most critical, most important for us. And I think if you talk about our exports, si China, yun yung talagang mabilis na naka-recover eh. And in fact, if you look at our export figures for April, I think we're about 72% higher than compared to our export figure in April of last year. But then you might say that might just be a base effect because of the steep decline that we had in our exports last year. But if you compare that with 2019, that is about 1% higher than 2019. So we are already hitting the 2019 level and a bit higher pa. So in terms of recovery, we are really already seeing, hindi lang siya green shoots but nandyan na yung recovery natin. And if you look at what are the drivers for that growth, mainly electronics, as usual. So as usual, if you look at our exports, to a big part, it will be driven by what is happening sa electronics. And kita nyo naman, big demand internationally when it comes to electronics, and malaki pa rin yung base ng China. And in particular, because China is recovering faster than anywhere else in the world, that's why it really makes sense for us to look at that market.
Okay, another question from Hubert Chua. Would you characterize the independent foreign policy and golden age of Philippine-China relations as a net positive for Philippines trade investment? Were some of the other more traditional sources of investment impacted negatively?
I think net positive din talaga, sir. One, not just because of what we were able to gain from China, but also because we were able to leverage our, meaning ganun lang din naman ho yun, for us sa policy side, whenever we discuss, whenever we talk with our counterparts from other countries that may not be, that may have a different dynamic in terms of the relationship with China, we also leverage our closeness with China, and we just say, okay, you're just pushing us towards this particular direction because you are not doing anything on your side. So we try to leverage din naman ho yung mga yan.
Okay, for those who have questions, just put in your questions in the chat room. One question in behalf of Apcu. Apcu is the pioneer in people-to-people relations between China and the Philippines since 1974. Would you have any suggestions how Apcu can help further more investments from China to the Philippines?
Yung very critical for us is really getting commercial intelligence, firm level commercial intelligence about Chinese company lead prospects that we have. So siguro if our commercial attaché, we have 3 attachés in China, in Beijing, in Guangzhou, and in Shanghai. Siguro if there's a mechanism that we can have, parang ibato namin sa inyo yung pangalan ng kumpanya, and then if there's someone from your group who could tell us the nitty-gritty about that particular company, then it will be most useful. So just a quick example. So for example, when we are in a forum, sinasabi natin, okay, Philippines, ito yung advantages, etc., etc. Labor turnover of 5% per year. And number of strikes less than 10 per year. Pero we need to be able to drill that down to yung great points about us to the pain points of that company in China. Meaning, does it make sense for them? Baka naman, while China's labor turnover per year is 24%, but for this particular company, baka naman hindi niya problema yon. So yung ganun we need, tsaka yung financial statements. Hirap din kami kuminsan when we search for mga financial ang hirap maganap dahil yan, yung mga ganun. If we can have siguro an MOU or let's try it informal first na ito yung company, bato nyo sa mga members nyo, tas give us info about this company, and then help us develop from the country value proposition, gawin nating very detailed na company pitch and then for a particular project. Yun.
Yeah, perhaps that could be one of our projects in Apcu.
Nako, malaking tulong sir yon. Very, very big help for us.
Okay, so thank you, Yusek Perry Rodolfo. And now for the closing remarks, we would like to call on Apcu Deputy Secretary General, Mr. Peter Q. Davina.
Thank you, President Jeffrey. In behalf of the Apcu Board of Directors, led by Secretary Raul Ambino, we would like to express our gratitude to Yusek Seferino Rodolfo for his very informative and insightful presentation of Chinese investments in the Philippines, as well as the overall economic relations between the Philippines and China. Yusek Ferry, may the force be always with you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Also,
Thank
we would like to thank all our participants. Umabot po tayo ng 165 today for your participation this afternoon. Before leaving, we would like to invite everyone to the first awards for promoting Philippine-China understanding. This will be on August 6, 3 p.m. You can follow us on Facebook and YouTube. This is a joint project between Apcu and the Chinese Embassy. So please put that in your calendars. So everyone, daghang salamat from Davao and from Apcu. Keep safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you to
Thank you,
Jeff,
Mr.
everyone.
Rodolfo.
Perry, before we go, because
Yes,
I
sir.
have to go around also CESA now, I would like to take this opportunity, Perry, to invite you to come to CESA. And hopefully, kayong dalawa ni Secretary Mon Lopez will come together with DJ Roel Barba.
Sige, sir.
When the
Thank you, sir.
president is going to come here, I think that would be September, and maybe some of the Apcu officers can also come. And we hope that there will be more Chinese investors, commercial groups that will be coming into CESA when the president is going to be arriving here. So let's schedule on that. We'll put that in our itinerary. That this is going to kick off a good Chinese or even foreign investors. I have Korean investors now waiting for me downstairs, and also we're again inviting the Taiwanese, our contacts in Taiwan and our contacts in Hong Kong and Japan to consider against CESA. So again, thank you, Perry, thank you, Jeff, and thank you all officers. So see you soon. Pete, I wasn't able to go to Davao lately, so let's meet when you are in Manila. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you all.
you, everyone. Have a great day ahead. See you August 6th. Okay.